Deepwater Horizon oil spill threatens pelicans saved from extinction. For more than a decade, the hundreds of brown pelicans that nested among the mangrove shrubs on Queen Bess Island were living proof that a species brought to the edge of extinction could come back and thrive. The island was one of 3 sites in Louisiana where the large, long-billed birds were reintroduced after pesticides wiped it out in the state in the 1960s. But on Thursday, 29 of the birds, their feathers so coated in thick brown sludge that their natural white and gray markings were totally obscured, were airlifted to a bird rehabilitation center in Fort Jackson, the latest victims of the Deepwater Horizon disaster. Another dozen were taken to other rescue centers. 6 more pelicans were brought there on Friday, and as visitors to the center looked on, the birds huddled together in makeshift plywood cages and, in their unnatural stillness, looked as if the gooey muck had frozen them solid. It was a very sad sight to see. The 29 pelicans brought in Thursday were being treated in hot rooms by workers in protective clothing. The pelicans are in dire trouble, said Doug Inkley, a senior scientist with the National Wildlife Federation, who worried that the oil spill could put an end to the birds' recovery in Louisiana. Hundreds and hundreds dead, damaged. The images of oil-covered birds, pelicans, northern gannets, laughing gulls, and others are eerily reminiscent of the Exxon Valdez disaster 21 years ago, and have in recent days become the most vivid symbol of the damage wrought by the hundreds of thousands of barrels of crude oil that have poured into the Gulf of Mexico since the Deepwater Horizon rig exploded on April 20th. Since the spill, at least 612 damaged birds had been cataloged as of Friday, most dead, but some alive and drenched in oil, federal officials said. Yet the brown pelican, because of its history of robust recovery in the face of extreme trouble, has a special significance for the public. The birds were once so common on the coastline that they graced the state flag. They were frequent companions for fishermen who shared their waters and admired their skill at spotting fish from afar and diving from great heights to scoop them up in their bills. At the turn of the 20th century, observers estimated the brown pelican population in Louisiana at close to 50,000. But by 1961, not one nesting pair could be spotted along the state's entire coast. Like another subspecies of the brown pelican found in California, the local birds had been hard hit by DDT and other pesticides, which acted to thin the shells of their eggs. The eggs were crushed when the adults sat on them. DDT was banned in the United States in 1972. And now, the oil spill could, yes, finally do them in. In 1968, Louisiana took birds from a surviving Florida colony and reintroduced them along the state's southern coast in 3 spots. One was Queen Bess Island, which had been the site of one of the last breeding pairs before extinction. Still, the birds struggled, threatened this time by the loss of their habitat, the local wetlands hurt by levees in the Mississippi that blocked sediment from flowing downstream, and by canals cut by oil companies looking to lay pipe, were sinking into the Gulf at an astonishing rate. Queen Bess was going under as well until 1990, when a coastal restoration project financed a rock barrier around the island, which stabilized it. The pelican colony began to flourish, and the birds' offspring helped repopulate the coastline. Last year, the birds were officially taken off the endangered species list, but the oil spill experts say, could easily change all that. Like all birds, pelicans are very sensitive to oil. It prevents them from regulating their body temperature when it gets on their feathers. And in Louisiana, the pelicans are subject to overheating. The oil can also poison the fish the pelicans feed on, and seep through the shells of pelican eggs, killing the embryos. Very frightening. The potential for damage was frighteningly apparent at the rescue center set up here by the International Bird Rescue Research Center with BP and federal and state officials. All day on Thursday, oiled birds, including the 29 brown pelicans, arrived at the makeshift veterinary emergency room. They were carried in Coast Guard helicopters and dog kennels and cardboard boxes with air holes punched in them. Most of the birds were so thoroughly coated in crude that they could not even stand up. Some were stuck to the floor of their cages. Workers wiped off thick globs of oil with towels, then gave them fluids and fed them a fish slurry. The pelicans were placed in plywood pens covered with blankets. The next morning, workers began to clean them using hot water and Dawn, a mild dish detergent. So far, even the most heavily oiled pelicans have survived. Had they not been treated immediately, however, they would have almost certainly drowned or died of starvation or exposure, according to a veterinarian with the United States Fish and Wildlife Service. The birds at the Rehabilitation Center, said Sharon Taylor, a veterinarian, represent a few. Much more, or far more, are certain to die in the wild. A lot of them will just disappear into the environment, she said. We will probably only find a very, very small percentage of what's been impacted out there. Still, she worried that because there are so many large rookeries nearby, many more pelicans would soon be headed to the center. Tomorrow or tonight we could get 100 pelicans. We could get 1,000 pelicans, she also added. And yes, this is another sign. More signs of the end times. Transition days. Everything is connected. Everything is numbered. And again, Ezekiel chapter 13, verse 19. And will ye pollute me among my people for handfuls of barley, for pieces of bread or money, to slay the souls that should not die, and to save the souls alive that should not live, by your lying to my people that hear your lies. Revelation chapter 16, verse 3. And the second angel poured out his vial upon the sea, and it became as the blood of a dead man, and every living soul died in the sea. 4. And the third angel poured out his vial upon the rivers and fountains of waters, and they became like blood. 5. And I heard the angel of the waters say, Thou art righteous, O Lord, which are and was and shall be, because thou hast judged thus. Revelation chapter 11, verse 8. And the second angel sounded, as it were a great mountain burning with fire was cast into the sea, and the third part of the sea became like blood. 9. And the third part of the creatures which were in the sea and had life died, and the third part of the ships were destroyed. And yes, these are more signs. Everything that must change quickly or rapidly, and it must change for the better. And all these disasters are showing the world what is wrong with these things. And there are many types of signs happening daily, all around the world.